So today I'm going to be reviewing Fast X, the latest Fast and Furious movie, and I have not seen any other Fast and Furious movie. When I got the email invite to the screening, I did consider watching at least the first one. I probably wasn't going to watch all 9 of them, but then I thought it would be funnier if this was my very first Fast and Furious movie. The 2 things I knew about this franchise was that it was about family and that they drove cars very fast. And when I said those things to people who are fans of this series, they said, yep, that's pretty much all you need to know. So I felt like I was very prepared. I expected this film to be an assault to the senses, and that is exactly what it was. Basically, the film starts off with the family. You have Vin Diesel with his partner played by Michelle Rodriguez, and they have a son. You have the rest of his gang of people that he hangs around with. They have a new mission to go to Rome and remove some kind of code from a truck, I think it was. But Jason Momoa, who plays the villain, is out to get them because right at the beginning of the film you see that Vin Diesel caused the death of Jason Momoa's father. That's pretty much as much plot as we get, which is exactly what I was expecting. The film is just an onslaught of various action pieces and Vin Diesel repeating that he loves his family and has to protect them, and Jason Momoa repeating that he's very upset that Vin Diesel killed his dad and he wants to cause havoc and chaos throughout the world. I feel like Jason Momoa is the only person in this film who knows what film he's in. He is playing this villain so cartoon-like and over the top. He's really good at it. He's very funny. However, part of his character is that he has painted fingernails and wears scrunchies in his hair and has very nice tailored suits. And you can't help but feel that there is certainly an implication here that Jason Momoa, despite obviously being a very masculine looking person, has these visibly feminine traits that are in direct contrast to Vin Diesel and the rest of the very muscly men that are supposedly on the good side. I don't know whether that was the intentional message of the filmmakers or whether they just thought it would be funny if Jason Momoa had painted fingernails and wore scrunchies because they themselves think it's funny if men do that. But either way, it's certainly reinforcing certain stereotypes about the way that men might like to dress. As I was expecting from this film, I found the action sequences pretty fun. They're very well directed, I think. They're really, really engaging. You totally get lost in the action and you really feel every second of it and feel the sort of speed of the cars and the explosions. It's exactly what you expect from this film, that the action sequences should be top-notch, and they really are. And then all the other scenes in between that where the characters are talking to each other are incredibly boring. They have tried to inject comedy in a lot of the scenes and the characters, but a lot of it is so weak and just does not land and is kind of awkward. Those things don't really matter because you are there just to see the action, so it's not like I was expecting this film to have great characterizations or great comedic bits. The film is also packed with every single actor you might associate with this franchise. They just keep popping up throughout the film, which also kind of makes it amusing, at least, because it just got so silly and ludicrous by the end. So basically for like the 2.5 hours of this film, it was pretty much exactly as I expected one of these films to go. So I was not disappointed in that respect, and aside from it being boring in places, I still wanted to know how it was going to resolve itself because they got themselves into such a tight corner. Before seeing this film, I had read online that this is the first in a planned trilogy. What had not occurred to me is that this meant the filmmakers want to continue this narrative for more than a singular film. So there is no final resolution in this film, and you will have to watch the second and the third one, I presume, to get that final resolution. It meant I left the cinema so frustrated and so annoyed that I'd sat through 2.5 hours of something to not have any answers at the end of it. I think I will be reading the Wikipedia page for the next 2 when they come out, because I don't think I could sit through another one of those films to then have to watch another one to get a resolution. I was getting flashbacks to watching Dune Part 1, and they were not pleasant flashbacks. I am curious to read reviews from fans because I wonder whether they will enjoy this film, if this is a good one in terms of the franchise. I certainly thought it was entertaining, although it's obviously over the top and the cars do things that cars can't actually do. There certainly wasn't anything like going into space, which I heard has happened in this franchise before. I don't think I will be catching up on the whole series, but I am curious to at least watch the first one because I heard that that is a much more low-key film comparatively, and also the fact that there was a main character and unfortunately the actor died and so he was only in the first few. I can imagine having someone else as the main character who isn't Vin Diesel would change these films a lot as well. I am glad to have seen at least one film from the franchise now, and it certainly was an experience. The other film I have to review this week is John Farnham, Finding the Voice. This is a documentary about the singer John Farnham. If you are Australian, you are born knowing the words to the song You're the Voice, or at least knowing the chorus. It is just such an iconic Australian song, completely synonymous with Australian music, to the point that I've never really listened to this song properly, and that's something I really love about watching music documentaries, is that I think really famous music and musicians can feel so familiar that you actually forget how talented and creative these songs actually are. So this was quite a fascinating documentary. I knew nothing about the life of John Farnham. He started out in the 60s singing very classic 60s style music, sort of imitating a very British style, which is kind of what Australian artists did back then, I think. He had a really famous song called Sadie the Cleaning Lady. That was pretty much his first single and became a massive hit. And it was almost a case of having success too early because he was so busy touring. He actually had no time to properly record his own music, which is what he really wanted to do. It also meant he became synonymous with that style of music, and a lot of people thought it was really quaint and silly, and especially moving into the 70s, solo artists just weren't that fashionable. It was all about the bands, and as hard as he tried to get himself away from that particular genre, people still associated him with that song right up until he sang You're the Voice. That wasn't a song he wrote either. That was one of many demos that he was sent when he was creating this particular album with his producer and another person, but they did actually change it quite a bit from the original demo, including putting in the bagpipes, which I didn't even think about the fact there are bagpipes in this song because, again, it's so familiar to me. But that is kind of crazy to put bagpipes in a song when you actually think about it. Because bagpipes can only play at a B flat, I think it was, they had to change the key of the entire song to B flat, and that changed the tone of it completely as well. And yeah, so they sent out this demo. The producer was so excited. They knew that this was like the one. And people still didn't want to play it because they literally just read the name John Farnham and didn't even listen to it. And finally they managed to get one of the radio producer people to listen to it, and she was astounded, and of course put it on air, and it became this massive hit, and John Farnham became a huge success since then. John Farnham's quite ill now, and so he doesn't visually appear in the documentary as he is now. You hear some voiceover from him, which I presume was recorded quite recently, but all the visuals we get are of him from the time that we're talking about, which kind of does make it quite interesting because it does really focus you on the story that they're telling rather than sort of looking at how he looks now. But there are lots of talking heads with the musicians and the producers and the friends he has that are still friends with him now. It's a real testament to him. He's clearly a really lovely person because all these people are so happy to talk about him, having played with him and worked with him for decades. In terms of the actual way the documentary is made, I found it a little bit repetitive, and I think it assumes a lot of knowledge about Australian music of that era. When they had talking heads, they didn't really explain who they were well enough for me to quite grasp it. I sort of figured it out as the documentary was going along. I have no idea if John Farnham is at all well known outside of Australia, so I do wonder whether the documentary is only intended for people who already know who John Farnham is. I think the documentary is really lucky that there is so much recorded footage of him, not just performing, but there's stuff from behind the scenes and interviews he did, and you get a real visual picture of his entire life, and I think that's really fascinating. To have that all collated in one film really provides such an amazing visual timeline of his career. I think definitely not having John Farnham really narrating his own story, but sort of just providing little bits of insight here and there means you definitely get more of an outside perspective of his career. You're certainly getting it from people who are really close to him, so it feels like it's really accurate and it's very personal, but it does mean he kind of remains a little bit of an enigma throughout, which maybe is what he wants, as this is an official authorized documentary, so he definitely had a lot of control over how his story was told. You really get the sense that John Farnham was just someone who was born to be a performer. That's where he felt most comfortable and alive, and having had so many rejections for a song that made him famous that he didn't even write himself, and it was just something he did when he was so young at the beginning of his career. You really get the sense that that experience made him incredibly grateful for all the success that he got from You're the Voice. It's funny, I'm not a huge music person in that I kind of just listen to the same songs over and over, and I never really listen to new music, but I love music documentaries because I think music can be so reflective of the time that it's made in. And so I feel like music documentaries are as much about a sort of social history of a time and place as they are about like the band or the music itself. That's what is new in the cinema this week. I hope you get to watch some great films this week, and I will see you next time. Bye.